My fingers and toes were so cold they were numb. And my feet and legs were so tired from standing that all I wanted to do was sit down. But the cold seeping through my jeans made that an impossibility. As I stood there with 10 or so other colleagues, I had to wonder, when did I make this terrible mistake? Now, in retracing my steps, it was very obvious to me that I had been a passive contributor to this debacle. Things began my freshman year in college around October with an ear infection that never quite went away. By November, I had come down with a particularly nasty case of strep throat. And by the time we got to the winter break in December, it was all I could do to go to work each day and then come home and sleep on my parents' sofa. I was thankful for the relief that going back to school in January brought me, because that meant I could actually sleep through my classes without my mother nagging me. I spent about a week or so sleeping through classes, sleeping through parties, sleeping through meals, when my roommate Claudia finally said to me, "If you don't get out of this bed and take a shower, I'm going to pull you down and throw you in the tub myself." Now, a little bit about Claudia. She had been a randomly assigned roommate, and she had a very large personality with opinions that she was not afraid to express. That, coupled with the physique of a Russian female wrestler, made her pretty much always the one in charge. And if that weren't enough, she had Daddy's money to back up any idea that she had in mind. So when Claudia said she was going to pull me out of bed, I looked at the distance between the top bunk and the floor and decided maybe I would take that shower. And that's how my roommates managed to find me, passed out on the bathroom floor, wet and cold and naked, about an hour later. That earned me a trip to the emergency room that night, where I received yet another diagnosis: mononucleosis. So I returned back to the dorms with a prescription for codeine, and somewhere in my feverish haze, sometime in the month of February, Claudia presented me with a glossy, colorful flyer. And she kind of slipped it in front of my face, and she said, "I think we should do this." I picked up my head, I opened an eye, and I said, "Huh." And that, for Claudia, was consent. And that's how I found myself preparing in the middle of March for my first ever spring break. Now, the package that we had purchased included round-trip bus transportation and beachfront hotel accommodations for Panama City Beach, Florida. The bus was expected to pick us up at 4 p.m. at the Patriot Center right on campus. And so my bag was packed and ready with everything I was going to need. I had my swimwear, I had my club clothes, and I had a bottle of tequila. Not to mention the $53 I had left after I paid Claudia for my trip. That's when Claudia got the phone call. Unfortunately, the bus was running behind and was not going to be able to pick us up on campus. Instead, we would have to be at New Carrollton Metro Station by 6 o'clock. That's where it was going to pick us up. So we took our luggage onto the Metro, we headed across town, and there we were in pleasant New Carrollton. 6 o'clock came and the bus did not. Then 7 o'clock, then 8 o'clock. The Metro closed at midnight and kicked us all outside. And there the 10 of us stood with vodka and Kool-Aid to keep us from frostbite and boredom. That bus pulled in around 2 a.m. And our relief was only momentary because we got to look at the thing. First of all, it was a pretty rundown looking bus with no obvious signage on it except the very back that said Bro Taker Tours. There was no room in the under part for our luggage, so we had to take the luggage on the bus with us. We get inside the bus, and there is no room for our luggage in the bins above because people are passed out there. And there is a pleasant-smelling river of alcohol, urine, and vomit flowing, sorry for those of you eating, flowing from the restroom all the way to the exit door. So we filled in the last remaining seats. We picked our knees up and pushed them against the seat in front of us so our feet wouldn't have to sit on the ground, and we rested our luggage in our laps. And because we were so drunk and exhausted, we promptly fell asleep. About 2 hours later, we're around Richmond. Most of us sound asleep except for Vivian, who was evidently very alert in the back seat, because she yelled, "Somebody wake the bus driver!" All of a sudden, the bus goes right, and then suddenly left across 4 lanes of traffic before it finally came to rest in an actual lane again. Whew. Somehow, we did make it down to Panama City Beach. But this was not the restful and relaxing vacation that I had had in mind so that I could recover from being so sick. And the crummy hotel that we stayed at was not any better when we were done with it. There we engaged in all of the usual spring break antics until it was time to come home again. That is when we discovered the horrible truth. As it turns out, spring breaks run back to back to back, and the Bro Taker Tours bus serves them all. So after coming down with yet another load of spring breakers, it immediately loaded us back on to the same filthy bus without even a cleaning in between. It had not gotten better for the week of use in between. Now, the trip that we had taken down to Florida had been pretty much along 95, and then we kind of took a right once we got to Florida. But for some reason, the drivers used a different map this time. And we ended up stranded in the middle of Alabama, nowhere near the highway, with a bus that decided to break down. Saturday turned into Saturday night, and nobody in town would help us. It was somewhere in the wee hours of Saturday night that our replacement bus came to pick us up. So we all loaded our stuff onto the replacement bus, and we headed off toward Atlanta, with the original bus following behind. It was around lunchtime on Sunday that we arrived in Atlanta, and at that point, they took us off all the buses and left us at Hardee's, where we stayed for a couple hours with the buses in the parking lot. Several hours later, they loaded us back on the original bus without any mechanical work appearing to have been done whatsoever. And yet the bus was deemed fit for our return home. And by home, I use that term loosely because as it turns out, the bus was now so far behind that it couldn't actually return us back to campus, and instead dropped us off around 2 a.m. in Springfield, a group of girls to fend for ourselves. We did eventually find a taxi and make our way back to the dorms. Because I was even more exhausted than before, I managed to sleep through most of the rest of the first few weeks at school, only occasionally listening to Claudia as she yelled into the phone, attempting to reach someone at the tour company to arrange a refund. And this is when I learned a very important lesson. There's one way to defy Claudia. Just disconnect your phone.